Let's begin with the slokas. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Tatoma Sadgamya, keeping our mics on mute. We can all chant together. Oh, Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo, Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Asato ma Satkamaya, Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's offer our pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi and pray for his grace and blessings so that we may be receptive to this wonderful wisdom. May his grace ignite the lamp of awareness within us and keep it burning steadily. So I'll just share my presentation with you. Can you see it? Sajni, is it visible?
Yes, visible, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So during the past several sessions, yeah, somebody was saying something.
I said both are clear, the voice as well as the presentation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Satni. So over the past several sessions, somebody has to mute, I think. Can everybody mute, please? So
Kate, please mute everyone.
I have.
thank you, Aniket. So we have gone through Karma Yoga. Bhagwan has taken us through the very, very detailed intricacies of Karma Yoga. And from Shloka 1 to Shloka 5 did Karma Yoga. From Shloka 6 to Shloka 10, we have gone into the intricacies of Bhakti Yoga. And today, we are coming into Raja Yoga. Shlokas 11 to 15 deal with Raja Yoga. And out of that, Shlokas 11 to 14 need to be studied together. Otherwise, separately on their own, they don't make sense. All together, they're giving us the total information that Bhagavan wants to give about Raja Yoga has to be looked at one shot from 11 to 14. So we will be looking at 4 shlokas today. Why do we need Raja Yoga? Raja Yoga is technically, according to Vedanta, Raja Yoga is the control of the mind. If we sit down for meditation, most of us, maybe not every time, but sometime or the other, the mind wanders. A lot of thoughts will come and bombard us. A lot of memories will come and bombard us. A lot of details like what is the task that I have to tackle next or tomorrow or next week or some event that I'm planning maybe next month. What needs to be done for that? If there's a wedding coming up in the family, how many invitations we need to distribute? What else do I need to plan? Have I organized the caterers? So all this, if I close my eyes and sit down, then suddenly, out of nowhere, one after the other, all these thoughts will start coming up. And I find it really difficult to get into a thoughtless state. So this is about meditation. But even at other times, sometimes we need to do some task. Let's say a student has studied for the exam, you go and sit for the exam, mind becomes blank. You need to sit and study, you're studying, but then in the next house, the TV is playing loudly, gets on your nerves, or it reminds you that some show is there on Netflix or something that you would prefer to watch rather than studying, or you want to call your friend and talk to him or her. So all this keeps on pulling the mind in different directions. So many different directions. Instead of being focused on one task or the few tasks that we need to deal with at that time, or to meditate or do puja or japa or whatever it is that you want to focus on. Instead, the mind or the attention keeps getting pulled in diverse directions. That's why we said Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are necessary, because from Bahu Chintana, that means too many thoughts at a time in the mind, from that we come to Eka Chintana. We are able to focus on the most important or the thought which needs to get priority. So for that clarity of thinking, that control of mind, that concentration, that focus, that ekagrata, getting that completely under your control, that is called Chitta Shuddhi, or the purification of the mind. So just to take an example, Swami Chinmayananda tells a story to show us how fickle the mind is. Fickle in the sense of not able to stay focused on what is the right thing at that moment. So in this story, you can see a photograph now in the slide. There is a man standing near the bank of the river. So there was a village near the river, and this man called Gopi, he lived in the village, and he was not a very skilled man. He was not educated. Even in terms of farming, he could do some basic stuff. So he would go and help other farmers, but he didn't have a piece of land. So the farmers didn't need his help. He had no work, because in a village, there is not too much opportunity to generate a lot of work. So this was in, you can say, about 100 years ago, probably. So Gopi didn't know what to do. He had a family to support, and he didn't have enough money. So his friend one day suggested to Gopi, you are living on the bank of this beautiful river, and so many sadhus come here to meditate, to do their sadhana, to do their tapasya. So why don't you go and serve those sadhus? Whenever you don't have any other work to do, go and serve those sadhus, whatever they need, getting them firewood, lighting fire for them, washing their clothes, things like that. Why don't you help them with that? So when sadhus are very pleased, and if they have supernatural powers, then they may give you a boon. And you can ask that you should not be in this kind of poverty anymore. So this seemed like a good idea to Gopi. So he started looking around, and one day Aniket, animation is not working. Aniket,
Yes, I'm here, madam.
animation is not working. What should I do?
Can you minimize the PowerPoint presentation and open it again?
Okay. But presented, is it in the meanwhile? Just bear with me.
Yes.
Share content. ಇದು ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಲ್ಲ ಅನಿಮೇಷನ್ ವರ್ಕ್ Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Aniket. Okay, so this sadhu came to the village and he started meditating on the bank of the river. So Gopi generally started making himself useful. So that's true. In any way that the sadhu needed help, he would go and help him. Vishweshwarji, you need to mute. So while he was doing this, every day in the afternoon, he would go to the river to wash the clothes of the monk and bring water for him. So when he came back, the monk would have a delicious bread. Again, animation is not working. So he would come back and would find all kinds of delicacies waiting for him. Now in the picture, you can see masala dosas, idli, vada, upma. So all kinds of things every day, hot, steaming hot, crisp, ready to eat. It would be waiting. And the monk would say, Gopi, sit down, let's both of us eat lunch. And Gopi would wonder, in that 10 minutes that he has gone to the river, how can the monk get all this food ready? It's impossible. And there is no fire. The monk never asks for firewood. How is this food cooked? Every day this would puzzle him. And, like this, 6 months passed. Gopi has been doing diligent service. He has been assisting the monk in every way. And finally, the monk says, Gopi, you are a very good boy, good man. Beta, what do you want? Tell me, whatever you want. I know you are not very well to do. If it is within my capacity, I do have some powers. If it is within my capacity, I will grant your wish. So since Gopi had been thinking about this for 6 months, he said, Maharaj, I have every day seen you sitting on one special meditation mat. And that mat seems to be having a lot of wonderful powers, almost like Kalpavriksha, the wish-fulfilling tree. That mat seems to be a wish-fulfilling mat. So would you please give the mat to me? So Sadhu says, Gopi, that's not the right decision. You know, this mat is very special. Only someone who has a very pure mind, who does not have any selfish desires, and who is able to control his mind all the time. So only such a person should sit on this mat. So this is not the right gift for you. Ask me for anything else. Whatever you ask, I will agree to that. but don't ask for the mat. But Gopi became very stubborn. He said, no, no, Maharaj, I don't know if you want to give me the mat. Otherwise, it is okay. I will just think, I have done your seva. I didn't have any expectations. I am fine with it. So then the monk became helpless and he said, all right, take the mat, but be very careful. When you sit on the mat, have complete control over your mind. So Gopi said, fine, I'll do that. The mat was given to Gopi and the sadhu went away. And then he went to the river, took a bath, was very excited. He came back, he sat down on the mat. Then he said, very nice. Today I'm very hungry. Maharaj went away in the afternoon. I didn't have any food also with him. So I want masala dosa, idli, vada, upma, everything, piping hot. And immediately in front of him, all this food appeared. Still, he ate really well. And then he's sitting, and it looks as though it's going to rain. Rainy season, clouds are in the sky. His hut is very small, it leaks. So then, why don't I ask for a nice big mansion? So he says, I want a big mansion, beautiful, many rooms. Should be like a palace. So immediately, big palace appears. So he says, who is going to take care of all this? I have a wife and children, okay. But then who is going to wipe and sweep and dust and take care of all the rooms in the palace? I want a whole team of servants. So immediately, a wonderful, efficient team of servants, they come and they start cleaning the palace and maintaining it. And Gopi is feeling hated. He's no longer poor. I want lots and lots of money. So lots of money will come. It's wonderful. He's sitting and contemplating a wonderful future. He's still sitting on the mat. Suddenly, from somewhere deep from the subconscious mind, a feeling of insecurity starts. And he says, okay, I have all this. If there is an earthquake, what will happen? Immediately, there's an earthquake and everything is destroyed. Gopi also dies, mat also is gone. So how difficult it is to control the mind. This entire thing that Gopi went through took him maybe about 5 to 10 minutes, more than that. So within that, can somebody mute, please? Aniket, can you mute everyone? So within that 10 to 15 minutes, Gopi is not able to control his mind. This happens to all of us. It's just an example. Once I did an experiment in class, a design class in college, architectural design, and students are there. I told them, okay, you need to come up with a creative concept to design a building. The project is already given to them. So they have to think of a creative concept. It's just 5 minutes. 5 minutes, close your eyes. Visualize. You're walking through a beautiful building. You're coming in. What do you see as you come in from the road? What is on either side of you? What is there in front of you? Just keep watching as you walk. So they sat. And after 5 minutes, I said, okay, can someone share? And then one student said, ma'am, I could do it only for a few seconds or maybe a minute. After that, my mind started wandering. I could not focus on what I was supposed to do. And most of the people in the class agreed with her. So this is the state of mind. So Atma Vichara or self-inquiry to find out who am I or to find out my true nature is not a difficult thing. Bhagavan says it is not a difficult thing, but it becomes difficult if you can't control the mind. If you are in control of your mind, it is an easy task. You just have to keep on focusing on it, and at some point of time, it is done. And change ಮಾಡಿದ slide. Okay. So this story, I think many of us have heard. Another behavior of the mind is forbid the mind something, then the mind will repeatedly go back to that. The minute you forbid the mind to do something, it wants to do it. It's a perverse quality of the mind. So there was this guru, and he had many disciples. Then one day, one disciple went to the guru, and the disciple said, Master, can you give me a mantra? Please initiate me into a mantra. I want to start doing some intense sadhana. The guru gave him a mantra, and he said, you can chant this mantra anywhere. You can chant it at any time, you can chant it anywhere. Only when you chant this mantra, don't think of a monkey. When you chant the mantra, don't think of a monkey. So when the disciples started chanting the mantra, normally thoughts of monkeys don't come into his mind at all. Why should they? But the minute he starts chanting the mantra, monkey, 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 not one monkey, two monkeys, three monkeys, hundreds of monkeys climbing trees, jumping everywhere. Monkey sitting on his bed, monkey sitting on his chair. Everywhere he can see monkeys. Why? Because he was told you should not think of monkeys. Immediately the mind started thinking of monkeys. So when we are doing sadhana, we are told don't give attention to negative things. Don't give attention to what is false, body, mind, and intellect. Their appearances in consciousness. We have looked at that many times. So don't go on giving more and more importance to that feeling of separation. Look at unity. There is one self, and on that self, this entire creation, including all living beings, they're all appearances on that one self. So everybody is a part of you. We normally begin with this beautiful prayer, isn't it, from the school? Oh, hidden life, vibrant in every atom. Oh, hidden light, shining in every creature. Oh, hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. But the mind, instead of focusing on this, will keep on returning to the differences, will keep on returning to separation, will keep on returning to that small entity called body, mind, and intellect. So this is the perverse nature of the mind. So Bhagavan says, you need to tame the mind, at least for a little while. You're sitting down for self-inquiry. So during self-inquiry, you need to have control over your mind. So for that, tame the mind so that for a period of 1 hour, half an hour, it's in your control. So for that, he says, use the breath. Let's look at the shloka that Bhagavan is giving us. Upadesha Saram, shloka 11. Shall we lead and follow chanting of this shloka? Vayurodhanat liyate manah, Vayurodhanat liyate manah, Jalapakshivat rodha sadhanam, Jalapakshivat rodha sadhanam. So, liyate manaha. Liyate means it is suspended, the mind is contained. Normally, mind is jumping around everywhere. So, liyate manaha. Manaha is the mind. Liyate is contained. When is the mind contained? Vayu rodhanat. Vayu is air or breath. Rodhanat means mastery over the breath or control over the breath. So, when you have control over the breath, you can contain the mind. Sadhanam, the last word in the shloka, sadhanam means technique. So if you use the technique of breath control, you will be able to contain the mind or control the mind or master the mind. How? Jala pakshivad rodha. Pakshi is a bird, jala is a net, rodha is contained, bound. So like a bird that is bound in a net, you will be able to contain. So through the technique of breath control, the movement of the mind is contained like a bird that is restrained when trapped in a net. So for a couple of minutes, we'll just try out the technique of controlling the breath and see what happens to the mind. You just take up a comfortable meditative posture. Close your eyes. Keep your spine straight so that when you breathe, you can fill your lungs completely with air. Don't lean back against a chair or something for a couple of minutes. Just sit straight so that you can breathe deeply. Start breathing deeply. Inhale slowly, deeply at your own pace. Exhale slowly and deeply. Deep inhalation. Slow and deep exhalation. No hurry. आराम से completely relaxed. Deep and slow. Slow and deep. Let your attention be focused on the breath. Watch your breathing. After each inhalation and after each exhalation, there is a natural pause that happens on its own when you're not breathing. A small pause. Just observe the pause. Inhale. Observe the pause. Don't try to lengthen it or anything. Just observe the pause. When you exhale, then observe the pause. become aware of how quiet the mind is becoming. As you keep focusing on your breathing, the mind has become so calm, so peaceful. Whenever you feel like it, slowly open your eyes. So Bhagwan says, suppose a bird, holding a bird in your hand, and the bird wants to fly. If you hold one wing of the bird tightly against its body, the other wing is free, but the bird can't fly with a single wing, can it? It can't fly with a single wing. So like that, for the mind to keep wandering, the attention of the mind, actually the mind doesn't wander, our attention wanders. So for the attention to keep wandering from one thing to another, mind and breath both have to function together. But if we control the breath like we did now by watching the breath and slowing down the breath, breathing deeply, we control the breath. It is like holding one wing of the bird so that it cannot flap. So when we hold one wing, the other wing also will fold up and both wings will be still because the bird can't fly with one wing. So that is how closely the mind and breath are related to each other. They're very intimately connected to each other. If you would have noticed many times when the mind is calm, even if you notice from today onwards, you just keep checking how your breathing is going on. When the mind is very calm, breathing is slow. When the mind gets agitated, even if you feel very happy or excited, even then your breath, the speed of your breath increases. And when you're angry, the speed of your breath is very high. Sometimes people panic, they're very angry. So this is the relationship between mind and breath. So Bhagavan says, when you are sitting down for self-inquiry, when you're sitting down for meditation, or when you want to sit down for any kind of sadhana, where you need the cooperation of the mind, first use your breath to quieten the mind. This is not going to be of long duration. We quieten the mind now, then after mind is again wandering around, thinking of different things, negative thoughts may come up, negative feelings may come up. Everything starts again after some time. So it's a temporary effect, but still your dedicated sadhana, if it is for half an hour or 1 hour, before that, if you do this kind of breath control for a few minutes, how long should we do it is a question we often get. So it doesn't matter how long you do it, actually. The end point is important. When your mind becomes quiet, sometimes if you do it for a couple of minutes, your mind may become quiet. I'm hearing my own voice. Can someone mute, please? Somebody has not muted. Thank you. So sometimes in 2 minutes, we may be able to achieve peacefulness of mind, attitude of the mind. Sometimes it may require 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It depends. For us, on one day it may be 2 minutes, and on another day it may be 15 minutes. So you don't look at the clock for that. What you look at is, when is my mind ready to engage in self-inquiry? It should be calm enough for that. So till then, we watch the breath. After that, we let go of the breath and we start focusing on finding out who I am. That inquiry we have done before, we'll do it later again. So this is one kind of breath control. And Bhagwan also says you can combine jnana with pranayama. If you're finding that this is not enough, if you're finding your mind is not becoming quiet because of this, then you can combine jnana, that means knowledge, whatever you have learned about self-inquiry, combine that with the breathing. How do you do that? Bhagwan calls it also antah pranayama. The one we did just now is bahi pranayama, external pranayama. Now he calls this internal pranayama. So how do you do this? With exhalation or rechaka, Bhagwan says, inside your mind, say, I am not this. Naham deham. Actually, the entire teaching of self-inquiry can be compressed into two phrases. Naham deham, koham soham. Na aham deham. I am not the body. Koham, who am I? Ko aham means who am I? Soham, so aham, I am he, or I am that, I am the self. So as we are exhaling, we are letting out the air that we don't need. Either you can use phrases like na aham, or I am not the body, or you can just have the feeling, I am not anything that I can perceive, I am not, including the body, mind, and intellect. I am not this. You can just have the feeling, I am letting go of whatever I am not. So when you exhale, you do it with the feeling, I am not this, I am not the body. Na aham deham. Inhalation. When you inhale, it's called puraka in Sanskrit. When you inhale, you say, Ko aham, who am I? Either you can verbally say it, or you can direct the attention inwards towards the silence, the peace, the quietude that is inside. Keep your attention there as you breathe in. Then we notice that there are natural pauses. Kevala kumbhaka. Kevala is natural. Kumbhaka means retention. We are not forcibly retaining breath here, because that could be physically harmful. It requires a lot of training. It requires certain bandhas, yogic bandhas, to make it safe. So we are not actually retaining breath, but after every exhalation and after every inhalation, automatically we are getting natural pauses in our breathing. So when such a pause happens, then in the pause, so aham, I am he, I am that. So this also can be used as a technique for breath control. We can do it now for breaths. Again, let us sit straight, close our eyes, not lean back against the backrest of our seat for just a few minutes. Eyes slightly closed. Start observing your breathing. As you exhale, do it with the feeling, I am not this body. As you inhale, Ask yourself, who am I? Or focus on the silence of the mind. And when the natural pause occurs, just affirm to yourself, I am that. Once again, exhale. Anything that I perceive is not me. Inhale. Ko aham, who am I? And in the natural pause between breaths, once again, affirm, I am that. Slow, deep breathing. Do a couple of breaths on your own. I will not guide you verbally. Keep your focus on the breathing and on the feeling. Slowly open your eyes. So if we find this helpful, we can also use this technique of Antar Pranayama. Jnana plus breath control. How long do we do it? Till the mind is quiet. Then you can let go of the breath, let go of watching the breath, and just focus on being still. We are still. If a thought comes, you say, for whom is the thought? It is for me. Then who am I? Again, the mind is still. We just enjoy the stillness. If there's a thought, we again do the same thing. So this is the process of self-inquiry. So here, Bhagwan is telling us a little more. Why is it that we are able to control the mind using breath? Bhagwan says, many people ask, why are we able to, why does this impact of mind on breath exist, or breath on mind exist? So in the 12th shloka, Bhagwan is telling us about that. Let's chant this shloka together. Chittavayavaha chitkriya-yutaha chittavayavaha chitkriya-yutaha shakayordvayi shakti-mulaka shakayordvayi shakti-mulaka. So Bhagwan says, Chitta Vayavaha, Chitta and Vayu, that is the mind and the prana or the breath, Chit Kriya Yutaha, they carry out many actions in the mind and the body. We know that there are Pancha Pranas, Prana, Apana, Samana, Vyana, Udana. They all have different tasks. So prana there are 5 different kinds of pranas or life force. which carry out various tasks in the body. So together, the mind also carries out various tasks in our life, isn't it? It thinks, mind makes decisions, it thinks, it emotes, it focuses, it concentrates, it plans. Without the mind, we would not be able to carry on our life. And without prana also, we would not be able to carry on our life. So why are they so intimately connected to each other? Bhagavan says, Shakhayor Shakti Mulaka. So both of them are like two branches. Shakha is branch, Dvayi, two branches, coming out from a common trunk called Shakti. So Shakti is nothing but Prakriti or nature or Maya Shakti, who is manifest consciousness. Of us, the entire world, which is manifest, is because of Shakti. Maya Shakti is what shall I say? It is a strength of the. So self has a Shakti. It has a potential energy, and when this potential energy manifests, we call it Maya Shakti. It will manifest as all living beings and the entire creation. So this Shakti in every individual, in you and me, it has two branches. One branch is breath or life force, and the other branch is the mind. So there is a Vedantic story to show us the importance of prana. It seems there was a fight going on between the mind and ear, eye, nose, and prana, life force. So they were all fighting, and each one of them is saying, I am more important than you. I play a more important role than you do. So this fight is going on. And it's not, they can't resolve it. So finally, they say, okay, this individual is there. Let's try. Which first is more important? So first, hearing goes away. The individual carries on as he is. Then speech goes away. So speech goes away, but still the individual can't talk, he can't hear, he's still continuing. Then suddenly eyesight goes, smelling power goes, but still the individual is able to carry on living. The mind goes away, so individual goes into a coma. But he is still there. When prana begins to leave the body, all organs are affected. Everything starts shutting down. So then everybody begs prana, don't go, you are the most important. Please come back, we will also all come back. And that individual becomes normal again. So without prana, nothing works. The pranamaya kosha, the energy body, sheath of life force, is like an interface. The physical body is there, the annamaya kosha is there, matter, that is matter. Between matter and mind, the upper sukshma sharira or the mind and intellect, if the mind and intellect have to work through the body, the mind and intellect together are Jnana Shakti. Jnana Shakti. Jnana Shakti means the power to know, the power to comprehend. And Ichha Shakti also works through them, the desire or willpower to carry out something, to plan something. You have a task, mind and intellect will plan it together. The desire to have to carry out the task arises in the mind first, that is Ichha Shakti, and then mind and intellect will find out how to plan the task, how to put it into execution, that is Jnana Shakti. But the body has to execute that task. Without the body, you cannot execute the task physically. So for that execution to happen, Prana Shakti has to be there. whatever is happening in the mind and intellect has to be conveyed to the body, and the body has to execute. So for this entire thing to happen, Prana Shakti is absolutely essential. Otherwise, Kriya Shakti cannot happen. So Prana is also called Kriya Shakti, the power of execution. So mind and Prana, both together are required for us to carry on any kind of task. Without that, we can't do it. There are two branches of the tree called Shakti, Moola Shakti, the energy that is manifesting as the universe that functions in us through Ichha Jnana and Kriya Shakti. And Ichha Jnana and Kriya Shakti work through the mind, intellect, prana, and the body. So, prana is extremely essential for us. When we control the prana, we are able to control a lot of things. So, just to understand this a little better, I have a pictorial slide here. We have Maya Shakti or Prakriti. This is what Bhagavan said. There is a trunk. From the trunk, we have two branches coming out. One is Chitta or mind, and the other is Vayu or breath. So, by controlling the breath, we are able to control the mind, because both of them are emerging from the same root or the same trunk called Maya Shakti or Prakriti. We have this story just to understand how to use breath control. There was this bull in a farm somewhere abroad, a very, very ferocious bull. Nobody could do anything with that bull because he would simply, he was terribly strong. He could come and butt you and use his horns and go. He was absolutely dangerous. So the owner said, somehow I need to tame this bull. So first thing he did was he put an enclosure, he put up a fence. Because in the first picture on top, the bull is absolutely free. Then here he's peeping out from a fence. So first he put it in a fence. What he started doing after that was he observed, what does this bull like to eat? It likes green, luscious grass. Then it likes some kind of grain. If I give it to the bull, grain and water mixed together, it likes it a lot. So slowly first he would stand on the other side of the fence outside the enclosure, and he would feed the bull with grass or with grain. And over a period of time, he would try to touch the bull. Initially, the bull didn't allow him to touch it. Then slowly it became tame. It allowed him to touch the bull. We see him petting the bull here. He started going into the enclosure. Still, the bull didn't do anything to him. Then over a period of time, he could remove the fence. And in spite of that, the bull was very calm. He didn't do anything. Finally, he could even sit on the back of the bull and ride it till the bull was ready to obey him, and it didn't do anything. So like that, the mind or the attention, which is wildly flying around. 1 minute it is here, another minute it's in the US, another minute it is in my son's or daughter's house, then after that it's in my grandson's school. I'm sitting in one place, but my mind is wildly wandering around everywhere. So Bhagavan says, use your breath. We see the man is sitting on the bull, he's holding a harness, he's holding reins in his hand. So use the reins of the breath to calm the mind. Yes, temporarily, but still, when you want to sit down for sadhana or you want to focus on some task and your mind is not cooperating, use a little green grass. Show the mind that peace is its nature. How? Focus on the breathing. Thoughts subside. Mind becomes calm. Then mind realizes, oh, peace is my nature. Ah, so beautiful, so peaceful. And then the mind becomes ready to cooperate with you in your sadhana. So in the same way that the farmer tamed the bull, Bhagavan says, put a fence of jnana. What is the fence of jnana? Give right knowledge to the mind first. Tell the mind, you are identifying with the body, mind and intellect, but actually my true nature is boundless, it is limitless, it is bliss, it is peace, it is love. So the mind should get firmly anchored. Yes, it is understanding, mental understanding, intellectual understanding, but still that understanding is required. Each time we go into meditation, we should go in with the right understanding. That's why we have all these dhyana shlokas. You start any Upanishad, you have dhyana shloka. You start, can you mute please? You start looking at Gita, there are dhyana shlokas. What do the dhyana shlokas do? Dhyana shlokas give the mind a right framework. Every time it is required. Why? We go back into our transactional world. Most often we forget. What is my true nature? I forget. So then when I sit down for sadhana, I need to remind myself once more. So again, I put the fence. What is the fence? The framework of jnana. I remind my mind, I remind my intellect, this is your true nature. This is my true nature. And then with that awareness, I use breath to tame the mind, to calm the mind, to bring it to a state of peace and cooperation. Then I start the sadhana. So this should be a process until the sadhana itself will acquire an energy of its own. Then it goes on 24/7. Nobody needs to tame the mind anymore. It is tamed already. So till then, we need to keep on going through this process. So this is a very useful tool that Bhagavan is giving us. Shloka 13, another very important thing that we have noticed also, Bhagavan is pointing out to us. Let's chant together. Laya vinashane ubhayarodhane Laya vinashane ubhayarodhane Laya gatam punar bhavati nomritam Laya gatam punar bhavati nomritam. Bhagavan says, Ubhaya Rodhane. There are two ways of mind control. Ubhaya is two. Rodhane, control. There are two ways to control the mind. What are the two ways? One is Laya, that is temporary suspension of the mind. The other is Vinasha, that is total destruction of the mind. So Laya, we have all experienced. This is our experience that Bhagavan is talking about. When we go into deep sleep, what happens to the mind? Mind is in a state of suspension. It is dormant. It is not active. So we have no awareness of the body. We have no awareness of the mind. We have no compartments. In deep sleep, we just are. It's a beautiful experience of existence and bliss, infinity. There is no limitation. So every night when we go into deep sleep, mind goes into laya, mind goes into suspension. In the morning when we wake up, it comes back again. And when it comes back, it is the same mind. Last night, whatever was the refinement or evolve, however much my mind had evolved the previous night, the same mind comes back in the morning. There is no difference. We sit for meditation. That day it's a beautiful kind of meditation. We are having a so peaceful, so calm, so blissful. I don't want to get out of meditation today. Yesterday, it was horrible. I was just bombarded by thoughts. But today, I don't have to do anything. My mind is so calm. It's so wonderful. Do I need to get up? Do I have some other task? I need to stop meditating. Such a pity. So we get up. And we are in bliss. We are so nice to everybody. Someone we don't like comes to our house. We are so nice to that person that day. It's like life is frictionless. That whole day for me, life seems to be frictionless. Nothing can upset me. Nothing can take away this peace. Nothing can take away this bliss. And then the next day or sometime in the evening, come back to the normal state of functioning. Once again, Laya is gone and it has come back. It is no longer in suspension. So it is temporary. This is in our experience. Again and again and again, every day we experience this. So Bhagavan says, when you are using the breath, remember, you are only sending it into Laya. It is temporary. It is only a temporary suspension. After some time, the mind will come back. All the vasanas will come back. The anger will come back. The jealousy will come back. Everything will come back. That doesn't mean we should not do it. Every time we do it, the vasana force is weakened a little bit, tiny bit, 0.05%, 0.01%. It's a slow process. And it comes back again. But do you know, Bhagavan is saying, there is another way. Layagatam punarbhavati. When you send the mind into a state of layagatam, send it. It goes into a state of laya. It goes into a state of temporary suspension. Punarbhavati, punaha bhavati. It comes back again. But if you send it into vritam, into a state of nasha or death or destruction, no mritam, it does not come back. It never come back. None of those vasanas will come back to pull you in diverse directions, to make your life miserable. None of it will come back. So he's telling us, be aware. There are these two different states of controlling the mind. I'll just read the translation. Suspension and temporary merger and destruction are two ways to achieve mind control. Of these, the suspended mind emerges again, while the destroyed mind is dead and will never emerge. So now we may get a question. This is the state of jnani. Somebody who is enlightened actually is in this state where there is no mind. We are very fond of saying no mind state also. So he is in a no mind state. His mind is dead. And you may say, if somebody's mind is dead, does that mean that person is like a vegetable? He or she is not able to function normally in the world anymore. They can't talk, they can't walk around, they can't analyze, they can't think, they can't execute tasks. They just sit in one place without doing anything. Is that death of the mind? Is that what it means? So for that, Sri Narasimha Prabhuji, who is guiding me on the path of self-inquiry, he has given this beautiful explanation from Vedanta, which makes this very clear to us. So what we call mind normally in English, Sanskrit or Vedanta calls it antahkarana, the inner sense, antahkarana. And this mind has four functions or four aspects. It is one antahkarana, one mind, but it has four aspects, four functional aspects. It functions four different ways. So one is through manas or mind, which generates thoughts. So continuously, we have this experience that thoughts keep on emerging inside us. They keep on being born in the mind. They keep arising in the mind. So thoughts and emotions, they are generated by this functional aspect called manas. Then we have buddhi or viveka. Buddhi or viveka is always engaged in analysis and decision making. Is it better for me to do this or that? The pros and cons of both decisions. If I do this, these are the good things. If I do this, these are the good things. If I do the first one, these are the drawbacks. If I decide the second way, these are the drawbacks. So weighing up, the buddhi will say, okay, do this. Then we have what is called ahankara. Ahankara is nothing but a thought. The thought that I am the body, mind, and intellect. And from this thought, we have hosts of other thoughts. The minute I say I am the body, then anything related to this body is mine. These clothes are mine. These shoes are mine. This house is mine. This bed is mine. This wardrobe is mine. So I am BMI, that one thought will collect a host of other thoughts. And it applies what is called sticky gum to everything. To say this is mine. It goes and stamps everything. Mine, mine, and mine. A thought goes and stamps everything. It's an invisible stamp. Only we can see it. But it binds that thing to us with a very strong glue, stronger than Fevicol or Fevibond or any other glue that is physically available. So that is ahankara. Then we have chitta. Chitta is the memory bank. So anything that happens, all our learning goes into the memory bank. So normally, ahankara, I am BMI, tries to control everything that is happening in the antakarana, in what we call is the mind. So mind, manas, the aspect of that generates thoughts. With respect to some task, it will generate a few thoughts. It will say, okay, this is the way I will perform this task. So for that, whatever is relevant, those thoughts get generated. I perform the task. After that, manas need not keep on generating thoughts, but ahankara will come. It says, unless you keep on generating thoughts, my identity goes away. It's like if we can imagine two fans. There is a baby fan and a mother fan. The mother fan is constantly spinning and the baby fan is still. So baby fan says, Mama, you're a wheel, but I have only 3 pieces sticking out from me. But you are like a complete circular, beautiful wheel. So how is it? How can I become a beautiful wheel like that? Then the mother says, you should keep on spinning like me, non-stop. You stop for even one moment, everybody can make out that you have only 3 blades. As long as you keep spinning, you will continue to look like a beautiful wheel. Spin very fast, keep spinning, never stop. So ahankara is like that. It stops thinking, we discover it's a sham. It's non-existent, it's just one thought. How much power can one thought have? Power comes from keeping on generating thoughts, more thoughts, more thoughts, more thoughts, so that it can look like a gigantic entity which you can't take away, you cannot destroy. That's how it sustains its identity. So it tells the mind on generating thoughts. So it will give trigger. So I finish this task, then ahankara will say, okay, finish this. Okay, now just think, what will you wear tomorrow? Okay, that or this. You look very nice in that. Somebody else said you look nice in the other one. Then when you decide that dress, then you think of next thing. When you're wearing that dress, then tomorrow, what will you wear with that? And then you wear that with this. And then after that, who will say what about you when you wear this dress? Already you're going. That friend may say this friend may say that. Continuous, non-stop, compulsive thinking, most of it irrelevant, most of it unnecessary. So simply it is overworking the faculty of manas. This being also made biased. Buddhi is actually like a witness. But what does ahankara do? It creates biases using like and dislike. So it tells Buddhi has to make a decision. It has to, that they go to the office and allot a particular task to somebody. And for allotting the task to the team member, Buddhi has to decide which team member is the best person to handle this task. Then Ahankara comes and Ahankara says, this person is much better than the other one. So you allot it here. Buddhi is thinking of that. This person has the right skill set. The other person doesn't have the right skill set. But Ahankara comes and says, no, the other person, is always complimenting you. Very good, nice person. So even if he doesn't have the skill set, give it to him. It's okay. The other person, he works well, but he never comes and compliments you. He's never very nice to you. So it's okay. Give him some other more unimportant task. But the project is affected because wrong decision has been made. Wrong decision has been made because of Ahankara interfering. So it affects the working of Manas, it affects the working of Buddhi. Chitta. Chitta will keep on bringing up memories. Actually, Chitta's job is only giving factual memory, functional memory. I have learned how to drive the car, so Chitta will take that memory, how I should drive the car. Chitta will bring up things that happened in the past. Somebody was very nice to me. Chitta will say, that person said, you are nice. Then Chitta will say, that person called you a fool. And Ahankara comes in. Ahankara will start applying masala. Mirch masala. That person called me a fool. There he called me a fool. That has happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Still what is happening? I am reliving that entire incident. The anger, the hurt, the injury. The whole thing is coming. My body is getting affected again. Hormones are getting produced. Adrenaline is getting produced. Entire reliving is happening. Chitta is only giving the functional memory. Chitta is only bringing back factual memory. But Ahankara is bringing back the hurt and the anger and the embarrassment and the humiliation. So, Bhagavan says, when you use, a thought comes into the mind, it can be any thought. And if you use your buddhi, your viveka, and you say, for whom is the thought? This thought is for me. Then who am I? When you ask that, mind is quiet. Silence is the answer. That thought goes away. Who am I? Thought also goes away. And we keep on constantly engaging in the self-inquiry. Then what happens? When we have done it for a sufficient amount of time, maybe weeks, months, years, depending on how much asana load we have, how deep this IMBMI thought, how deep its roots are. So when we have done it for a sufficient amount of time, then this IMBMI goes away, Ahankara remains, but only functional Ahankara remains. Bhagavan says it is like a burnt rope. A rope can tie you up. You have a regular rope, it can tie you. Ahankara ties you. Ahankara ties you to this identity of the body, mind, and intellect, to that limitation. But when that IMBMI goes away, the rope is there, appearance of rope is there, but it is like a burnt rope. It cannot tie anything. You try to tie, it falls into pieces. So functional Ahankara will still allow you to function in this dream world. You are now awake. You are the self. You are, all beings are part of yourself. Nothing can touch you. You are bliss. You are peace. You are love. But for outward appearances, you can still function in this world. When you say I, to you the I means the self, but to others it will still mean body. And you allow them to think that. You don't go and tell everybody, I am the self, I am not the body. You continue in the outer world. Your manas is working perfectly, buddhi is working perfectly. Buddhi is intellect, manas is mind, ahankara is ego, only functional ego, just to keep up appearances. Karnatak, karonatak. You are playing a role and you are aware all the time that you are playing a role because there is no BMI thought. Memory is perfect. Functional memory, factual memory is working perfectly. So this is called no mind state, where only the functional is there. I am the BMI ahankara has been destroyed. That is called destruction of the mind. That is called the no mind state. So this is the state of Ajnani, and Ajnani can function perfectly in the transactional world also. So we are just coming to the last shloka that we are going to do today. Let's chant it together. Prana bandhana lina manasam. Prana bandhana lina manasam. Ekachintanaat nashametyadaha. Ekachintanaat nashametyadaha. So when the mind is held in suspension, we have sat down for self-inquiry. We have quietened the mind using the breath. By controlling the breath, we have suspended the mind, prana bandhana, by controlling or mastery of the breath. Lina manasam, we have sent the mind into a state of temporary suspension, into a state of laya. Then Bhagavan says, Eka chintana nasha metyadaha, taking the opportunity of complete cooperation of the mind. At that point of time, focus it fully on the one reality, which is the self. With great intensity, just stay in the stillness. Be absolutely still. Be absolutely aware. That is your true nature. Then, at that point of time, you can destroy the mind. Destroy the mind means you let go of I am the body, mind, and intellect. That thought, you're able to let go of it permanently. Every night when we go into deep sleep, temporarily we let go of it. For a period of 8 hours, we let go of BMI thought. Every day we are letting go of it. In meditation, if you are going into a state of deep absorption, you have let go of it at that point of time for some time. Bhagavan is saying, let go of it forever. Otherwise, after that meditation, it comes back. So the only permanent way is to focus it when the mind is quiescent. When we have a baby, and the baby normally doesn't like to eat, it likes to walk around, crawl around. So mothers keep running around the baby with a bowl of food. They tell that baby, look, there is the moon. Can you see? Look at the moon in the sky. Isn't it beautiful? The baby is looking. At that time, mother pops some food into the mouth of the baby. So like that, you are quieting the mind using the breath. The mind is cooperative. Use that cooperation. It is only temporary, but use it at that time. Focus intensely on your true nature and let go of I am the body, mind, and intellect thought forever. This is what Bhagavan is saying. I have one last story for this shloka and we are done with this session. Many of you may have looked at pictures of Robert Adams, read his quotes, read about him, read his books, listened to his talks. So Robert Adams is a disciple of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. he passed away in 1997, means 23 years ago. Till then he was with us. I just want to share very briefly his spiritual journey with all of you. So Robert Adams, he was born in New York, in USA. And he says, there were some special experiences that he used to have. He himself has written. He says, right from the time when I was just a baby, just born baby, I was in the crib. Then I see this small man, 2 feet tall man. He would come stand outside the crib. He had short white hair and he had a white beard, short beard. He would stand there and he would talk. I couldn't understand anything. I would just watch. I couldn't even talk then. I was such a small baby. So this went on, and when Robert Sharma was a little older and he learned how to talk, he would tell his parents, look, this is happening. Or he would tell his friends. They would think he's joking around. He was a very mischievous child. Up till the end of his life, he was a very humorous man. He would keep on joking. Most jokes would be pointed at himself. So people thought that he was just joking. He says, by the age of about 7 years, I stopped seeing this person. After that, another thing suddenly started for some time. If he said the word God, God, God 3 times, he found whatever he wanted would just in front of him. So someone in class doesn't have a pencil. He says God, God, God 3 times. He'll get a pencil and he can give it to that person. And if he goes into an exam, the paper is in front of him. He says God, God, God 3 times. He can see answers visible in front of him and he just has to write it down. So this was one phase. And one day he had gone to a maths exam and he's sitting just to write. He says God, 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 but that time questions didn't appear. Suddenly, everything dissolved. And for some time, he understood that he was not the body. He understood that he was the unlimited self. But after some time, he came back to the same state. So this would keep happening to him. Temporary phases where the mind is suspended. In the waking state, he is able to understand that he is not the body. And then it comes back and then again he is limited by the body, etc. So somebody told him, there is this wonderful person master called Paramahamsa Yogananda, right here in the US. Why don't you go and meet him? So Robert Adams, at that time, he's a teenager. He's 16 years or something like that. He's so excited. He goes to Paramahamsa Yogananda. He's standing outside, and because the hall is absolutely full, and Yogananda ji is inside, then Yogananda says, there is a boy standing outside, please call him in. So Robert is called inside. Immediately he prostrates to Paramahamsa Yogananda and he says, can you please be my master, and you are my master. Immediately Yogananda says, no, I am not your master. Your master is Ramana Maharshi. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he is in India. And right now he is not well. Go quickly and meet him. And Robert Adams goes out of the hall, and in the ashram of Yogananda, there is a big library. He goes into the library, something pulls him into the library. He goes and he's looking through the book. Suddenly the book, Who Am I? He sees, written by Bhagwan, and the photo of Ramana Maharshi is there on that book, and immediately he feels the pull. This is my master. So he goes to India. He says, I was 18 when I came to Ramana Maharshi. That is in 1947. 1950, Bhagwan took Mahasamadhi. 1947, when Robert Adams is just 18 years old, he has gone to Ramanashram. The photo of Bhagwan that I have put is the photo that Bhagwan, it was taken somewhere around that time. So he has gone to Bhagwan and he goes into the hall. Immediately, Ramana Maharshi himself will say, come on, sit down. And he asks people to bring porridge for him and fruits for him. So Robert Adams eats and then he just lies down in that same hall and goes to sleep. When he wakes up, Bhagwan himself will take him to a room and he says, you stay here and you continue your sadhana. So next day morning, Robert Adams wakes up and he goes back into the hall to sit in front of Bhagwan, and he's sitting and trying to meditate. And he's feeling that and this in the presence of Bhagwan. So he's just sitting. There is one devotee called Krishna Swami. So this devotee keeps coming into the hall. And each time he comes, he brings against somebody. He goes and tells Bhagwan, Bhagwan, that person is creating this kind of problem. This person is not doing something properly. Every few minutes, he is coming back. So he says, Mr. Swami, come here. For what purpose did you come to the ashram? Remember, for what with what intention you came to the ashram? It was to do sadhana, isn't it? So remember that purpose. Stop talking. And Robert Adams says, I took that as an upadesha for myself. What was the purpose that I had come to this ashram? I had come because I wanted to be established in the self. Laya was not enough for me. Temporary suspension of the mind, periodical experiences, they were not enough for me because they were temporary. I wanted manonasha. I wanted death of the mind. I wanted I am BMI thought to be discarded permanently, because what is left after that is only the self. So I thought this is the Upadesha Bhagwan is giving me. And for 3 years, Robert Adams stayed on. People hardly noticed him. Young boy, teenage boy. All the time he would be immersed in sadhana. He didn't interfere in ashram affairs. He didn't try to talk to people. He didn't even try to talk to Bhagwan. He got established in the self. He says when Bhagwan took Mahasamadhi, when he passed away in 1953 years later, I didn't feel anything because all along I had been connecting to Bhagwan only as the self, not as the body. So there was no difference to my internal state of being. So after that, for some time, for some years, he wandered around in India. Then he got an inner command. He should go and share this wisdom. Bhagwan appeared in his dream and he said, go and share the wisdom in your own homeland. Don't pose as a guru. Don't build an ashram. Don't allow a lot of people to gather around you. Keep on moving from place to place and spreading the message of self-inquiry. So he did that. For 20, 30 years, he did that. Different parts of USA, he kept on going and teaching. Then finally, last several years of his life, he was affected by Parkinson's disease. But even then, he kept on traveling. He would sit quiet for 20 minutes. People who have participated in his satsangs, they say, everything would become absolutely still for 20 minutes, total stillness. Then he would talk for a few minutes and end the satsang. So in spite of the Parkinson's disease, he continued his teaching till the end. And he was bubbling with joy, joking around, laughing. That was the life that he lived. And he says, put this entire quote, though normally I don't take a lot of content on my slides. I'll just read it out. The only freedom that you have is to turn within. One day you will awaken from this dream, for this is also a dream, and you will be free, liberated. There is no such thing as birth or death. Nobody is born. Nobody dies. Nobody prevails in between. Nothing that appears exists. Only the self exists. All this is the self, and I am that. You are the absolute reality. You are consciousness. You are Satchit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. That is your true nature. Why not abide in it and be free? Empty your mind and become still. Everything will happen of its own accord. There is really nothing that you have to do. Just be still. Be still and know that I am God. I am is the self. Accept that and be free. So this is sharing of his wisdom. So today we have learned that you can control the mind using the breath, because mind and breath are two branches of the same divine energy. And when we control the mind like this, it is only temporary control, temporary suspension of the mind. If you want to control, if you want permanent bliss, permanent peace, then when you have controlled the mind using the breath, you have to concentrate, focus totally on the reality, on your true nature, and let go of I am the BMI idea, of the thought that I am the body, mind, and intellect. Then you will be completely established in the self, that is called no mind state, that is called destruction of the mind. So we can use this. We have learned also Bahya Pranayama, Antar Pranayama. Bhagwan gave us two techniques. So this is, Bhagwan has taught us many different things today, very useful things for control of the mind. So if there are any questions, we can take a few questions. I'll just come to the presentation and type your questions on chat. How to presentation? Stop sharing.
Please post your questions on the chat, or you can ask them. Unmute yourself and ask them. I don't think there are any questions on the chat, Vani.
Okay. Am I still on the meeting or no? You can hear me, right?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you very clearly. All right. So anything else anyone wants to see? I can see you also, Vani, very clearly.
Okay. So
Okay.
otherwise, we can just do 5 minutes
Yes,
of
we
sadhana.
can. We can do 5 minutes of that.
Let us sit. Somebody is asking about recordings of the talk. In the end, the school will post all the links at the end of the series. So, okay. So let us sit straight. Go into a comfortable meditative posture, eyes closed and straight. Watch your breathing. Keep your attention focused on your breathing. Deep and slow breathing. Slow inhalation, slow exhalation. Natural cessation of breath. At some point, after each inhalation, each exhalation, there is no breathing. It happens on its own. Just be watching it. When your mind is quiet, just go to I am, I exist. You know you exist. That's the only thing you know all the time from your own direct experience, for which you need no proof. So just stay in that existence, the knowledge that you exist. Very simple, the extremely familiar state to you, state of pure being. State of peace, silence. You are infinite, you are existence, you are awareness. If any thought arises, just ask, for whom is this thought? It is for me, then who am I? Go back to the I am state automatically when you ask the question. Just stay there. As long as there is stillness, be still. Whenever you feel like it, open your eyes. But before we open our eyes, let us offer our gratitude to Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi for the amazing wisdom that he has given us today, for the awareness that he has triggered within us. May this lamp of awareness continue to burn and establish us in the true self, in bliss, peace, which is our true nature. Thank you. There is one question here. You mentioned vasanas. Is there any food habit that we need to incorporate in our daily life not to succumb to vasanas? Generally, vegetarianism is advocated because in vegetarianism, we don't kill other animals. Plants are something we have to eat at least to sustain the body. And but when we don't hurt animals, that karma doesn't come to us. So a vegetarian diet is good. Some people also follow things like no onion, no garlic, less spices. But I think all that is a little subjective, depending on what you need. Whereas vegetarianism, I think, does make a lot of sense from the point of view of karma. But more than food, I would say a state of inner awareness is important. To be aware what is happening inside, to be like a witness to everything that happens in the mind is far more important than food in my own experience. So that's important that we just keep on watching what is happening